The date is June 4th, 2025, and I'm out here in Little Rock, Arkansas for my first of two visits with Little Rock natives. The first being one of my favorite authors in the world, Jen Fawkes. Now, Jen was one of the first 5 or so authors I reached out to for Books on the Bed before I did a single interview. That's how important I feel like she is to this project. And even though it took us a little while to get together here in Arkansas, I am so glad we're finally doing it. My story with Jen began at City Lights Bookstore in Sylva, North Carolina, well before I worked there. There was a period of weeks, maybe even months, where I would walk into City Lights and I would see Jen's short story collection, Tales the Devil Told Me, staring at me face out on one of the shelves. And it's an incredibly attractive cover, first of all. Look it up. You'll understand what I mean. But it was also one of those story collections that seemed like I would really love it. It was intriguing. And maybe I was just not in the mood for short stories at the time. I don't know why I wouldn't pick it up, but I just wouldn't for a while. And then, to me, it was a sign that nobody else had bought it. There was only one copy there, and I was like, you know what? I got to get it, and I got to read it. It's been calling me for some time. And when I got home, I started reading it. I think I finished it the next day, and when I closed the book, I knew that it was one of the best short story collections I'd ever read. And I also had that feeling that readers know well when you're just sitting there silent after you read a book and you realize you found an all-timer for you. I knew from then on Jen would be one of my favorite authors, someone I would share with as many people as I possibly could. And I just loved that feeling, you know? So that's why I decided to reach out to her last February as one of the first authors, because not only is she an incredible writer, but she has one of those curious minds that whatever books she chose for Books on the Bed, I knew would be great to share with all of you. And what was even better is I found out she was writing a novel, coming out with a novel in 2024 in the summer. And in the fall, we were able to get her to City Lights for a reading for Daughters of Chaos. And at that point, I'd become the events coordinator for City Lights. So it felt like a real full circle moment to have Jen in the store where I discovered her all those years ago. But here's the best way for me to describe how much I love Jen Fawkes and how deeply I've felt her work in my life. In sports, there are replacement level players. Okay, average players you could throw in any number of other players for, and it would be fine. And there's the same thing with coaches. You know, if you took Ryan Day off the sideline at Ohio State and replaced him with hundreds of other people, it wouldn't matter. You wouldn't even notice he was gone. The personality isn't distinct. His style of coaching isn't distinct. I mean, dime a dozen, you know? It's just, it wouldn't matter. But you take Jim Harbaugh off the sideline at Michigan, and all of us feel the loss of his personality and his coaching style and his life philosophy. It's night and day, no pun intended there. But the same thing happens with literature. And I'm not going to disparage any particular writers that I feel this way about in terms of the replacement level theory. But to steal from Kevin Brockmeyer, who I'll visit tomorrow, there's a lot of books on the shelves and on the top lists that are what he calls beige crayons. And sometimes there are whole shelves that are essentially a pack of all beige crayons. If you took any of those out, you wouldn't notice their absence. You wouldn't lose much. But occasionally, in a box full of beige crayons, you get electric green or some other magnificent glowing color that you're like, oh my gosh, where did this come from? And that color is Jen Fawkes. And so if we didn't have writers like Jen Fawkes on our shelves, we would lose that beautiful, bright, distinct color in literature. And we would know it's gone. We would lose something vital to writing and reading, and we would miss it dearly. Maybe some people wouldn't. Maybe some people don't know it's there, but they just haven't found it yet. But I did. What Jen Fawkes brings, the color, the richness, the bold imagination, that is irreplaceable. And you know how rare this is if you know me. But I don't think I need to say anything more than that. You're listening to Books on the Bed, where I travel through the country asking our hosts, if I came to your town and stayed at your house, what books would you put on my bed? Each host will share 6 books for me to carry with me on the journey of my life. And I'm here to share those books with you. As we go, we're building a digital library with every book put on every bed across the country. And who knows, maybe someday, the world. We are trying to share as many diverse stories as possible to part a curtain between us and bring us closer to each other. We hope these books and conversations make a meaningful difference in your life. Thank you for listening and being with us on this journey. So you'll love this.
Okay.
Guess where I spent yesterday? Part of it.
St. Charles. Are you serious? Oh my God.
You know I had to.
I can't believe it.
You couldn't. The first time we talked on Zoom, when you told me about where your mother's from,
Yeah.
I was like, yeah. Whenever I do go to Arkansas to do this, I'm gonna visit.
Wow.
Very strange place. Like,
Yeah.
I don't even know quite how to describe the mood there. But I was driving on that.
Abandoned is kind of.
Yeah. Don't even really need to go further than that. It was abandoned. It did feel haunted.
Yeah.
It looked like that post office was not still in use.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you're driving down the main street. Well, it's not called Main Street, though. Toward the monument that's in the center, which is
Civil War.
of course.
Yeah.
But it was this creepy moment that I hate to be stereotypical here, but it's happened in enough small towns where I'm like, it just gives me this strange feeling driving into a place. But I'm driving on that road at 10 miles an hour looking around, and I look in this house and there's an old woman standing at her door staring at me go by.
Yeah, yeah.
Like the glass door.
Right.
So the front door is open and there's just the glass one, and she's just watching me. And I was like, oh gosh. But I'm like, why does that always happen to me?
Yeah.
Like, why are they there?
Right, right. Well, anything that happens, anyone driving down the street there is like an event.
Yeah.
So, they're...
And I get sometimes worried about like being so clearly from another place and doing loops and back and forth trying to take pictures, because there's some cool stuff there. I mean, it's still, I love that feel, abandoned.
Well, my grandfather's store is still, the store that was his store is still standing, but it's abandoned. There's a gas pump outside. That was the general store. That was the Terry store. That's the Terry
How
store.
did I not make that connection?
Yeah. So it was the only,
oh my gosh.
That was where, he had people had their accounts with him, like the people who lived on the river had accounts and would barter with him and everything. He had everybody in town. That's where they got their, and the postmistress, drove a horse and buggy. That's how the mail was delivered. My mom was a girl. And when she told me those stories as a kid, I was like, I want to go back there. I wanted to like go back to that time and everything. But then, of course, by the time I was 14 or 15, I was like wearing all black and like, screw this, But anyway, there's something about I was always fascinated by like the pioneer, something about the early, what was it? I guess it's just I've always been interested in the way that people live,
Oh, yeah, an anthropology student.
Yeah, it's just it's linked to writing, for me entirely. And so many people that I know who are writers were anthropology majors. It's a weird thing.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I told you about that poet that came down to read at City Lights from Ann Arbor, Caroline Harper New. She's an anthropology PhD student in Michigan.
Okay.
And a poet.
Okay, yeah.
And so the amalgam of knowledge and spirit with her poems is like, it's enticing.
Yeah.
Because you can feel that anthropology background in everything that she's doing. But it just makes you a curious person. And I think when you look at a town like St. Charles, part of the reason I wanted to go there was obviously to see where part of your family comes from.
Yeah.
But also, when you think about the history of this country, like that was a frontier town to the max at some point.
Yeah.
Imagine coming to Arkansas before most people settled. It was wilderness.
Oh, yeah.
It would have been terrifying.
This was the edge of the earth to these people. It was the territory over there.
Yeah. So you're thinking of like, I'm just driving through there and standing there and remembering that people took such a risk to build that place.
Yeah, yeah.
And even if it's half abandoned now and 200 people, there's still a ton of story.
Absolutely.
To be told. And it kind of reminded me of Claremont, Iowa, which was a big trip for me in terms of kind of opening up my own curiosity and just following that penchant to travel and explore. And it was a very similar town. It was an old railroad town in Northeast Iowa.
Yeah.
So I can't get enough of those places.
Yeah.
But I just knew that that place was important because your mother was from there. And now I found out that store.
Yeah. That was her. That was the Terry store. And I guess my Aunt Libby claims that Papa Sam, my great grandfather, came from Philadelphia, Mississippi. That's where how he ended up in St. Charles, that he came to St. Charles from Philadelphia, Mississippi. But I don't know how much of I actually have my whole, Bill's good friend Joe, who does genealogy, those 3 big binders right there. That's my whole genealogy. One big book is the Terry side, one big book is the Fawkes side.
We might have to look at that before I leave.
So all of this real information is right over there, but my Aunt Libby being the only one of my mom's siblings who's left, she's the one person who has something to share about it.
Yeah,
and she just wishes someone would listen. I'm like, oh, Libby, but she's also she's crazy and like a lot to handle. So
sometimes those are the people you should listen to, if not for anything entertainment. You know? But it was such a cool experience. And I mean, I don't know much about, is it Dale Bumpers?
Yeah.
Is that the National Wildlife Refuge?
Is it Dale Bumpers or is it, I think it is Dale Bumpers. Yes, I think.
What an interesting name.
Yes.
But a beautiful wildlife refuge. Unfortunately, when I was trying to go down to the river, there was so much flooding.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm terrified of snakes.
Yeah.
The movie Mud.
Yeah. Well, we have had so
Falling
much.
in a pit of snakes.
Yeah.
In that setting. Literally it was perfect. Because I tried to drive down the old CCC road.
Yeah.
And then, you got to the lodge and where the road was supposed to go down and go by the water, I had to hit the brakes.
Yeah.
Because it was so flooded.
Yeah.
But it's beautiful out there.
Yeah.
Haunted.
Yeah. Haunted.
Abandoned.
I love
beautiful.
See, for me, the woolly, I think of Little Rock as being like really woolly because of all the vegetation is so lush and like unrestricted here. Yep. That's my favorite.
It's
That's
like
one
where
of
I live.
My favorite things about.
I mean, sometimes it's unfortunate where you're just like dodging spider webs and you never know what's in the brush.
Right.
But I wouldn't trade it, because it really feels like you're entering a jungle.
Yeah.
And even the short walk that I did that didn't go down to the river, right away saw woodpeckers and cardinal and, got a little creeped out when I'd hear things where I couldn't see. It was so thick,
Right.
But it was a wonderful trip. And I know that, most people might think that that's not worth a trip. But, I mean, your mother's clearly had an influence on your life as, a voracious reader and artist. And so,
she was my model. She was the only person that raised me. So she taught me how to be a human, for better or for worse. More worse, but I would say.
Well, because, and didn't you say that, because she had worked at Sears?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And that's where she met your father in Chicago.
Yes.
But she wanted to be a writer.
Yes.
So in many ways, you're living out that part of her hopes, not for her necessarily, but there is a link.
Yeah. And I actually I was never able to find, there was a novel that she wrote that I was never able to find the manuscript, but I have found some of her short fiction and pieces of work, some of which, I guess most of which I had never seen, but there is a short story that she wrote that is hauntingly similar to something that I would write, like almost, I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ.
Really?
Because it's about a woman who works with lab rats, about a doctor who works with lab rats, and then the lab rats take over the lab, which I'm like, wow, because my mom was not super into fantasy the way that I have been far more into fantasy and fantastic tropes than my mom ever was that I knew of, except for in the sense of the fabulists and the magical realists, which she did love,
It's so funny how you find a story like that and you're like, what the heck? How?
Yeah.
But of course, it had to be. I mean, you grew up with her, and she had to have something under there. But before we get to the books on the bed, I have to do my usual ritual, which is gifts for you.
Oh, okay.
So there was something I read, and we've talked about this before, but it was another interview that you had done where you said about the most recent book, Daughters of Chaos, I suppose it is pretty ambitious, but I hope the heart I installed at its center is able to beat someday for someone other than me.
Yes.
And that is certainly true. No doubt for me. I'm one of your biggest fans in the world. One of my easiest sells is if somebody picks up one of your books at City Lights and it's probably going out the door. It's money made for us. Because it's just easy when you love somebody's writing so much to sell it.
Yeah.
I mean, selling to me is just, people can tell when they pick up your book, any of them that we have, and they're looking at it and I start talking about it, they can feel how much I love it.
Yeah.
It's not the same with a lot of authors.
Right.
Sometimes I can sell a book,
Yeah.
but it's not easy.
Right.
You know, like I have to work for it. But with you, it's like, I mean, pretty much the minute I start talking, it's gone. That's how much I love it. And so I think that its center is beating for someone's other than you, no doubt. And I've had multiple people. I got a text from a friend who had sent Daughters of Chaos to a friend of hers, and then her husband was reading it because her friend, his wife said, you have to read this. And she sent me the text that he sent her.
Oh my gosh.
Like, this is incredible.
Wow.
Thank you for recommending it to my wife.
Oh my gosh.
So, you know, it's a big deal for me to put your books in people's hands.
Well, God, thank you, Matt. I mean, I don't know. You can't know how much that means.
Well, you know, as I said with Elizabeth Crook, who, you know, is not a bestseller traditionally, but to me, you are all my bestsellers. And truly, people that will continue to, like, if we spread your books, they'll know good writing, you know? And with all the milquetoast, what does Kevin call it, beige,
Yeah.
books coming out of a lot of major publishers, it sickens me to know that there's a whole generation of people, and some people die never having read good writing. And you're a real writer. And I just appreciate you so much for writing all that you have. And I'm glad that I picked up Tales the Devil Told Me all those years back
Me
after
too.
eyeing it, because otherwise I wouldn't have been here.
Yeah.
So
I really appreciate it. I mean,
to thank you.
Wow. I'm so happy that you picked up Tales the Devil Told Me. And oh my goodness.
I have 2 books for you.
Okay. This is beautiful.
They're both, the first one you might have read, and I don't remember if we talked about it. You've read so much.
Yes. Well.
And it feels like this would be in your wheelhouse if you had heard of it.
Okay.
So we're dealing here with your interest in things maritime.
Yeah.
Nautical.
Yes.
The ocean being something you're really interested in, but also very scared of.
Absolutely.
So I think these books play on your...
Yeah. I have 2. I have 3 books that touch on the ocean here. It turns out I'm looking at them and I'm like, wait a minute.
Come on.
Oh, actually 4.
You already know the deal.
I don't want to tear this gorgeous.
Oh,
I have
you
to
can.
say this wrapping paper is lovely and it's so nicely wrapped. You know, I am I love to wrap gifts. I really do. And the only person who's ever appreciated it is my stepson. He's like, my stepson Ben, he's like, oh my God, who wrapped? Like the first Christmas, Bill and I, my husband and I were together, you know, he came in and he was like, who wrapped these? Like, maybe that's what I can do. I can wrap books somewhere.
I feel like I'm
profession.
defying gender norms.
Translated from the Norwegian.
Have you read this?
I have not. No.
You've met your match.
Roy
Jacobson.
Jacobson. Okay,
Maybe
we say
Jacobson.
Jacobson.
I think it's Jacobson because he's
sounds better.
actually Norwegian.
Okay.
So here's what happens in this project.
Okay.
I go see Jesse Van Eerden in Roanoke.
Yeah.
Jesse Van Eerden shares all these books, but before I leave, she gives me this.
Oh.
Because she's like, I think you'd really like his writing. So it's a trilogy. The Barroy Chronicles. Okay. So this is the first of those chronicles, and it is on a remote island, right? Scandinavian tale. I'm not even going to begin to explain it.
Okay.
Because you'll just understand why I gave it to you when you read it.
Okay.
It is inexplicable, but it's how I feel after a lot of your stories. I don't even pretend to try to communicate it to somebody.
Yeah.
I just experience it.
Yeah.
And I always remember it. And when I put this book down, I was like, what the fuck did I just read? But it was incredible.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a similar element of not knowing what I'm feeling when I read yours and Roy's work, but you're going to love this
Wow,
book.
this sounds amazing.
Yeah.
This sounds really amazing. Thank you so much. It's The Unseen is the name of the book by Roy Jacobson, and I very much look forward to reading it. Thank you so much. That is so
And that
thoughtful.
cover is cool.
It
like
is.
the rowing in.
I can tell from what these
It
two
is
blurbs.
it is beyond philosophy.
Yeah.
I don't even know how does this guy exist? He's so good.
Now, do you know where he is now? And is he? I mean,
He's still-
he's
yeah.
writing and everything in Norway.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
To my
Very
knowledge.
cool.
Yeah, last I checked.
Well, I am going to, because I'm so sorry I didn't know you, Roy, if you're out there.
Maybe someday I'll travel to Norway and do this.
The international. Books on the Bed, the international
I have a few
version.
that I'm aiming
sure.
for.
I mean, you have talked to some, you've talked to a wonderful array of people for this. I'm really happy for you. Because I remember when you contacted me and you said, when you first got in touch with me, you said, I'm thinking about doing this new podcast. Yeah. And I was like, that sounds very
Isn't that crazy?
Cool.
Like you were one of the first.
January of 24, and I had just gotten to Fayetteville for that semester of teaching, and we had just gotten a huge dump of snow, and the first day of classes was canceled.
Yeah, that was like deep winter.
Oh, cool. Oh, this is awesome. Sea Women of Iceland. Oh, I love it.
So I got this book at a bookstore in Poulsbo, Washington, on the local authors shelf. And I was out there visiting one of my best friends from childhood, and we were roaming around town. He knows I have to go in the bookstores.
Yes.
He indulges me.
Yeah.
All of my friends have to, or else we're not friends. But I was kind of roaming around, and I always like to look at local authors, although I will say some places are really not good about having a lot of local authors or like what meets the criteria, because sometimes they want like the big names.
Yeah.
They'll kind of just relegate people like this. And I'm blanking on the author's name.
Oh, Margaret Wilson?
Yeah, Margaret Wilson. I was going to say Mary Wilson. But this was featured prominently on like a shelf at my eye level, and I had gone to Iceland for my brother's wedding and was pretty fascinated by it. Cool. The whole mood and strangeness of that place.
Yeah.
And then I read the origin of this story, which is she's looking at a historic marker, and it's explaining the life of this sea woman in Iceland in the 1700s. And then she stops and says, wait, she? Yeah.
I see that. Right?
Like, I mean, this to me, it's like you're a really curious person. Yeah. I think you will appreciate the work that went into this as someone who wants to understand humans and where we come from and how we've lived. And the tales of these women are incredible. And I'm also like, maybe there's something that inspires writing in you through knowing these people existed.
Absolutely. And so you said this one came from
Poulsbo, Washington.
Washington.
And I am blanking on the name. I think it's on the bookmark, the name of the bookstore.
Liberty Bay.
Yeah, Liberty Bay.
Okay.
Books.
Cool.
And the Unseen, shouts out Jessie Van Eerden. She is one of the best readers, just like you and Kevin and Tony. So you are all linked together to me. I could literally share your books on the bed or gifts like with each other.
Yeah.
And I do, actually.
I'm sure.
Quite often. For the Mississippi Book Festival podcast, one of the books I gave to Julia Phillips was Tales the Devil Told Me.
Oh, nice. Oh, how nice.
Yeah, so it's fun.
Well,
I like sharing.
Cool. I think I may have mentioned this to you, but she and I were on we were on the panel at the Mississippi Book Festival together.
Which makes sense. So.
These are wonderful.
So I had to do that to give praise and thanks to you. But I also want to talk about a couple things just related to being in Arkansas and your journey as a person and writer.
Yeah.
I'm lucky that so many of you do live, at least in the States, if not the cities where you grew up. And I know that people around the turn of the century were like, oh, books are dead. No way that bookstores are going to survive and everything's going to change. And a lot has, but indie bookstores are still thriving.
Yeah.
And I work at one in Sylva, North Carolina, so you know that we still stand for actual real books and real people.
Yeah.
But one place that I want to talk about, because I know it's important to you and your mother's favorite place on earth, was Publishers Bookstore.
Publishers Bookstore, yes.
So can you tell me about Publishers and why it was so important?
I can, yeah. So Publishers Bookstore. Oh, so it was. It was, this was before there was a Wordsworth. Wordsworth is post. So Publishers was around when we moved here. So my parents, we were in California. My mom and dad met in Chicago, where my mom was an advertising copywriter at Sears. That was her first job out of college. She got it through the post. She sent a letter and said, I'd like to... She got on a bus alone. She grew up in a very small town, Arkansas. She got on a bus alone with her suitcase, and she moved herself up to Chicago. She got 2 roommates. She roomed with a couple of other young women that she found, and she started working as an advertising copywriter for Sears. Now, my dad's oldest sister, Mary, was her boss.
That's right.
At Sears. And so that's how, and her younger brother was knocking around, trying to, my parents were the same age. And so they were but he had started college. My dad graduated high school at 15.
Jeez.
And started at the University of Chicago at 15. He also failed out at 15. I mean, so he was like a very immature 15. He was not ready for college.
15, that's incredible.
But he was a genius, like a certified genius. And his
a puppeteer.
A puppeteer. He was a magician, a puppeteer. He was a pianist and composer.
Okay.
He also painted and drew, like with pen and ink. So he did everything, but his parent, he came from a family that was very culturally aware and excited. The Egyptian prince I showed you downstairs, those came, their house, they had a brownstone in Hyde Park in Chicago that was just full of like antiquities and treasures and famous things. I mean, they were just, his father was a chemist. And his mother was a poet and a ballet dancer. So they were, they had this kind of, very, very interested in the arts. Now my mom, down in St. Charles, not at all.
Dichotomy, I'm like.
My mom was the outlier. She was the black sheep of her family because almost all of her other siblings were very sort of, they bought into a lot of the Southern ideas that my mom was like, no, I don't think so. No, screw that. I'm out of here, because my mom didn't. My mom was from a very young age. My mom was open to all kinds of people. She hung out. There were people that they called river rats, and these were the people who lived on the river. So if you've seen the movie Mud, we talked about this.
Oh, yeah.
So in the movie Mud, which is filmed right by where my mom grew up, it is set on the river that
That's
my mom
why I was so excited. The White River. I mean, you can't.
Yes. So yeah.
Which is hence I was afraid of falling in a pit of snakes like that kid.
Yes.
But yeah, DeWitt, like that whole place is beautiful to me because of that movie.
But that is an that is a tribute to True Grit, right?
Yeah.
So you know how Matty Ross falls in the pit of snakes? That I feel like in Jeff Nichols' film Mud, that was.
Well, he had to.
I don't know this. This is just me totally putting it together in my mind, but I feel like it was an homage to True Grit.
But yeah, anyway. I mean, like that movie, it's true to the culture of the river.
Absolutely. But so when my mom was growing up, they called the people who lived on the river river rats, and my mom was like best friends.
Yeah, not tour guides.
No, not tour
like
guides.
In Western North Carolina, you're not a river rat, you're a tour guide.
Tour guide.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Not to be a dick.
Right.
Anyway,
well, that's
real river rats here in Arkansas.
Yes, and so my mom ran around with all the river rats, hung out with all the river rats, so she was like this always. She was very different from her siblings. She was a middle child. She was super interested in reading, writing. I mean, everyone thought of her as like this genius, because she was like so far ahead of everybody else in school,
especially
and everything.
Around there.
Yes, because other people weren't really interested in intellectual pursuits.
So I mean, how did she satisfy that?
She had cousin Stell was my father's second cousin. Her name was Estelle. Oh goodness, if her last name doesn't come to me, because she's a very interesting woman. So she was the English teacher of everybody in the town of St. Charles. So, and she took my mother under her wing at a very young age because she saw what my mom was interested in. Yeah. So she was feeding my mom all these books and all this information about art and, theater and, just everything that she had, music that she had to share with her.
Wow.
So she picked her out and was like, you're the one I'm going to transmit all this to. And so that's how my mom, and now Estelle Dean's son he started doing radio here in Arkansas, like out of the chicken coop out back of their house. He ended up moving to Baltimore, and he had a show in Baltimore called The Buddy Dean Show. He ended up moving from radio to television. He had a dance show in Baltimore.
From St. Charles
to Baltimore.
Oh my God.
He had a popular kids dance show on television where he was like the host and the guy playing the records.
I need to see
His name was Buddy Dean, and guess who grew up listening to that show and who then made a movie about the experience? John Waters.
Oh.
You know the movie Hairspray?
What?
This is based the Corny Collins show, or Corny Collins show is based on the Buddy Dean show. And Buddy Dean has a cameo in the movie. In the original Hairspray movie, my my grandfather's second cousin's son, Buddy Dean, whose show inspired John Waters to make the movie Hairspray, he has a cameo in that movie. So next time you watch...
No one can see my face right now, but I'm stunned.
Yeah, it's insane,
See,
right?
this is why I do this. This is why I love... You never know what comes out of these random places. You know what I mean? Like, your family history, you could just drive through St. Charles and be like,
Yeah.
But come on. If you're there, it's like, there's got to be something.
Yeah.
There's a mysterious place.
I mean...
With Phillip... And like, whether people stayed or left.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many stories. I mean, look right just in your family.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Isn't it?
A lot of people are going to learn something very new.
Well, we went to see, my mom took me to see Hairspray in the theater when it came out, you know, and you know, so Hairspray, you know, it's like, but my mom was watching the young ones with us. My mom was so like, you know, such a non-traditional mom in every way, but she took us, you know, and one of the main reasons was she was like, there's Buddy Dean, you know, because he's in this cameo in the movie. And there's Debbie Harry with her giant hair, you know, with her enormous beehive hair where she hides the gun. And, I mean,
like, imagine the people back in St. Charles seeing that, or like, you know, that's a huge come up.
And so, but I mean, he just, and I say, he went from, he started as doing radio out of the chicken coop in back of their house and ended up with his own show in Baltimore, dance show. Yeah. So anyway.
there was some models. People that were,
but I have gone way off track. You asked me to talk about publishers. Is that okay?
This is great though. Yeah, because your mother's favorite place was related to the fact that she was able to get what she needed as a curious child that had someone in her corner. Yeah, I mean, because the line between being able to get that, and not is one person in those types of towns. I don't know if we ever talked about Katie McKee at Ole Miss. Who's the director of the Southern Studies program, English professor.
Yes, that's right, yes.
I almost got you this book that she wrote, too. Have you been to Holly Springs, Mississippi? Or have you heard of Holly Springs in the northeast corner of the state?
I don't think so.
Ida B. Wells has a house and museum there.
Yeah.
But the other person that I was interested in was... Oh, my God, I'm blanking on her name. Reconstruction-era woman... Oh my gosh, it's on the tip of my tongue. I hate when this happens. Sherwood Bonner.
Oh.
So Sherwood Bonner.
God, I know that name.
Was a woman in Reconstruction United States. And Katie McKee wrote a book about her because similar to your mother. And I mean, even you in a sense. Like, I mean, it's not as though Little Rock is avant-garde, you know?
Oh, like, my goodness, no. Certainly not when I was growing up here.
Well, and like the way that you write is not conventional. It's not something that's trying to conform. So Sherwood Bonner is in Mississippi in the late 1800s. She gets married to this guy because she has to and has a child with him, but she wants to break free. So she just fucking leaves.
Yeah.
So Massachusetts ends up with the transcendentalists and in the writing community.
Oh, cool.
And kind of just makes her own way for a while in writing and just like does this very bizarre thing. I'm not saying it's good that she just abandoned her husband and child, but she had to do it.
Right.
You know, because it's not like you're going to bargain about it. Right. It's not like you're going to have a sane talk with your family and be like, oh yeah, let me move to Massachusetts for a year, see how it goes. No. Yeah. So she just left. She went up there. And so there's a bunch of cool stories about her life, but her house, right? She's from Holly Springs. And when Katie McKee went to interview in Oxford, Mississippi, all those years ago. Obviously, they took her to Roanoke because of William Faulkner.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget when I interviewed her for my first podcast, she said, but I asked, where's Holly Springs? Because she wanted to go to Sherwood Bonner. But she learned about Sherwood Bonner in a library in a graduate program and ended up doing her dissertation about it, turned into a book. But it's like that type of character, Katie said, as someone from rural Georgia, it's like gave her a way to have this ambition to leave, to kind of break free from this closed society of the rural South, especially for women in art. And so, like, you know, there's all these threads of these people that I'm fascinated by it. And your mother being one of them, because that's not nothing to leave a place like that and
absolutely
see where it goes.
There are so many female writers, you know, 18th and 19th century female writers who left, who were like, hey, wait a minute, I'm out of here. I mean, it's like so many of like Muriel Spark had the same. I mean, now she's a 20th century writer, but just as someone who comes immediately to mind, Muriel Spark, same thing, had a child and a husband and just was like, I'm out. And I mean, it happened like I mean, so many that, because it's like the idea that you could not break these social, these social norms and mores was so outlandish at the time. And now, of course, it's like, that is something that people would have even been worried about. But there's a huge tradition of women leaving their families in order to pursue their art. I'm also not saying that it's good. It's not good or bad. It's just what has happened.
Yeah. Well, and things are a product of circumstance, and men didn't have to make that decision.
Right.
So, but anyway, I find those people fascinating. Yeah. And so going back to publishers and bookstores, so it's cool to know about your mother's experience having a teacher that helped her, but you come to Little Rock.
Well, she was, So my parents, she went to Chicago, met my dad, they got married. They ended up moving to California when I was a year old, and then they got divorced when I was 4. So my mom brought us back to Arkansas when I was 4, and my sister was 6 or almost 6. And Publishers was on Cantrell. It was on the back side of a shopping center that is standing. Yeah. So we could go look at the site.
Yeah. I sometimes do find it on a map where it used to be. Yeah. And I forgot to do it this time, so I have to do it.
Well, it's the Tanglewood Shopping Center on Cantrell, which is one of the main thoroughfares in Little Rock. And they have a front which has there's a Stein Mart and big things, and then around the back there's a whole nother set of storefronts. That's where Publishers Bookstore was. Gosh. So I mean, I know exactly where it was. And I have a couple of their bookmarks. And it's my favorite bookmark, and I use it all the time. And right now I'm like, where's my Publisher's bookmark?
30 years ago.
Because I keep it, because I keep this one that I have preserved. I keep that one bookmark, and I'd like to use it as much as I can, and I should be able to lay hands on it.
Well, because unless you found it secondhand in another book, you can't get it anymore.
Exactly. I mean, these don't exist. But so my mom became good, fast friends. Let me see. It's not in any of these. My mom became fast friends with the people that worked at Publishers, because she was an English major, and she wanted to write. She knew from a very young age, the woman who delivered the mail or was it a man? I can't remember if it was a man or a woman, but my Aunt Libby told me the story. Says when my mom left, she wrote letters. They wrote letters constantly back in the day. They wrote letters. And when my mom, they got a letter from my mom, it was an event, and everybody got together. Everybody gathered. My aunt and everybody else who was left at the house gathered together and opened up the letter, and her stepmother, my mom's stepmother, but Libby's real mother, read my mom's letters aloud, and they were full of stories of Chicago and these wild things happening in the big city and whatnot. But their postmaster said, "Well, I can now say that I know an Arthur, because my mom, she set out, and her goal was to become a published author. That was really what she wanted from a very young age, because she was just so entranced and enchanted by books and by storytelling. But so when we came to Little Rock, she had 2 small children to try to take care of alone, and it was even tougher in the 80s for women to get, for a woman alone to get something that could allow her to support both her kids. So she was incredibly busy, but with her free time and, not tons of disposable income, she went to Publishers and took my sister and I with her. And we spent so much time in that bookstore browsing, talking to her friends, because she also befriended, everybody who worked there. And then we would go on little outings with the crew from Publishers Bookstore. There's actually a poet. He may have passed on, but a fairly well-known poet named Red Hawk, whose real name is Bob Moore, and he was living in Monticello, Arkansas. Huh. He was one of the booksellers there and became a very good friend of my mom's.
That's so cool.
And so when my sister and I, we hung out and played games. He was very much into, anyway, he was this sort of free-spirited, pseudo, sort of a latter-day hippie with long hair, and wore a little rainbow beanie.
I love it.
But anyway, so that and the library, the Publishers Bookstore and the downtown public library were our homes away from home. I was more aligned with my mom in terms of loving to read. I did everything my mom did. I very much followed her. My sister was a little more, my older sister broke a little bit more from that and was less interested in literary pursuits and things like that. But in school in general,
it feels like it goes one of 2 ways.
Yeah.
Either you're exhausted by it and want to do something completely different, or you're caught up for whatever reason, whether you actually do love it or you think you need to.
Right.
Who knows?
And you don't know until I actually have good friends, writers, a couple who have 2 daughters. And every time they tell me about them, I'm like, oh my God, it sounds so much like my sister and I. And one of their daughters because they're both big book people. Crazy book people. Their oldest daughter loves to read, reads everything. Is just, wild for books. The youngest daughter,
nothing.
No interest. She wants to be an actress. And she's so, she's great, but you're right. There's like this, you sort of go one way or the other.
I think I feel blessed in some ways not to have been given what to read by my parents or even my teachers. Because I didn't have the type of teachers that really knew good books.
Right.
They taught them. But it's not like they were influencing me to read more. So I feel like I kind of just got to choose.
Yeah.
There was no pressure either. By the time I really started reading fiction, I was in my mid-20s.
Yeah.
I did a little bit in college and I loved it, but I was a history student.
Yeah.
And then education in grad school, I didn't have a ton of time to read novels.
Right.
And then when I read The Professor's House in one day from Cather, that's when it just sort of exploded. And I just feel like even how I got to you was just, again, cultivating that sense of, my friend Julian Davis calls it breaking the algorithm. Walk in a place, follow your intuition, see what's interesting. You should be able to, it's easy to spend 2 hours in a bookstore.
Yeah.
And just pick up things and maybe later. You never know, but it's way better than going to the internet and looking at a list. But, as a child of someone who read a lot, when did you know that you actually loved reading and writing and weren't following what your mother did,
Right.
Or did you ever have that realization, or did you just know?
Well, I think that as a child, my reading, so my mother gave me indiscriminate access to her bookshelves, which means I was reading really, really, inappropriate reading material. And my mother was very matter of fact. I would, pull down a book, I would start reading it, and I would say, Mom, what's methamphetamine? What's methamphetamine? And she'd say, well, it's a kind of drug. It's a stimulant. It's illegal. It's this class. She just would explain very calmly and rationally to me what, words that were, what's fellatio? Well, when a man and someone else love each other very much. Yeah. My mother did not keep anything out of my hands. Now, whether that was responsible and a good thing to do, I don't know. But I know I felt connected to the work. I also had, in terms of, my mom really struggled to support us. And so we had a pretty shaky, right? It wasn't and as it turns out, I found out years later that her father helped her out with money regularly, which I did not know. Because, and if he hadn't, we would have been in the streets. Because my mom could not. My mom was this wonderful, not unlike her daughter. Not that I'm wonderful, but this, had these huge ideas. I think this is part of she had these really big ideas, and she could have, it's if her circumstances had been different, she could have done anything. She could have conquered Europe. It's that's how I feel. She was, but she was not that great at practical day-to-day business, balancing the checkbook, and making sure, so kind of, there was our childhood was rocky in ways like that. And my mom was also emotionally a very rocky up and down kind of person, which, both my parents were that way. My sister was that way. It's kind of it's hard to get away from those kinds of familial, biological sort of. Yep. But of my sister and I escaped. That's how I escaped, was books. Yeah. So how much of it was, I'm going to read this series of books about people riding dragons because I need to live in a world that is not this one and that has some sort of hope or something, not the world I'm living in. How much of it was that, and how much of it was I love books? Back then I wasn't in any way discerning anything about the actual writing, as in, is this well written, right? When you're a kid, you're just getting the story.
Caught up in the story, yeah.
You're getting the story. So
you literally want to be there. Part of that
yes.
world. Yeah.
And I was reading things that were way, way above my head, and they were actually finely crafted. For instance, some of the books that I'm going to talk about, that are just, I mean, written by some of the most amazing writers who have ever lived that I read when I was like 8. And I was like, what a cool story, and not realizing what they were doing with point of view and the ways that they were managing time that are so incredible that I now see, as a writer today. But so there wasn't like a point that I can point to and say, this was, but I mean, because so for me, like I continued, I was a very good student. I loved learning. Learning is my favorite thing. I like learning about anything.
When I read especially your short stories, I see that as a product of having time to just be fucking weird and strange in your head. And then find a way to write about that. They feel like a daydream in some respects. So it's like, you can't there's nothing to replace that. Right? Yeah. I mean, AI is a big conversation right now in many different art forms, all of them.
Yeah.
But, why would you cheapen the writing experience when so much of it is just using your mind?
Yeah.
It's literally the best thing you have and being out in the world.
Yeah.
Right? And exposed. So at any rate, I think, we could probably do a whole 2 hours on that. But I think it's cool that you got to have that experience where you were given stories, going to bookstores and libraries. Not everybody has that.
Yeah.
And then it turned into a whole life of loving this thing called learning. And, so shouts out publishers. So we can start with whichever one that you want.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go kind of in terms of like time, like in terms of from my young life to today. It's kind of the path I'm going to take. And so the first book that I want to talk about is Italo Calvino's Italian Folk Tales. So this is not my mom's copy, but this is the exact same edition that my mom had. So she bought this. It came out. It was originally published in 1956, but the first paperback edition in the U.S. came out in 1980. Okay. My mom bought it at Publishers and brought it home. And I was like, ooh, that looks cool. And so I absconded with it. And I was 6, I guess, or 7. I was 6 or 7.
Oh my gosh.
And and as I did with many of her books, I rushed off with it, and I dragged this book around for about a year. I read it cover to cover multiple times. It is about 1,200. No, it's 1,000. No, it's not. It's 900 pages long. And it is so, when I was a kid, I only read the stories. I did not read the introduction, which is, it's funny that, now as an adult writer, I'm like, and then later, so I did not know who Calvino was, although I also read If on a Winter's Night a Traveler when it came out, because my mom, any of his books that were published in the 80s, my mom bought them from Publishers and brought them home, and I read them. So good. I did not know Calvino, and Calvino is also one of Kevin's most important authors. But the reason, I guess, for me, so this is so like Charles Perrault had done for fairy tales in France, and like the Brothers Grimm had done for fairy tales in Germany, there wasn't a collection of Italian folk and fairy tales. No one had ever done a comprehensive collection. So in the 1950s, Italo Calvino, who is arguably one of the most famous Italian writers of the mid-late 20th century, I guess mid-late 20th century, decided that he decided he was going to take on the task of compiling these folk tales. This was I saw it and was like, ooh, folk tales, and I ran off with it.
We couldn't start with anything else.
But he did not write these. These are not stories for children. These are absolutely not stories for children, although children can obviously read them. But they are stories that are full of really bizarre, violent, which like all fairy tales, right? I mean, fairy tales are scary. They're really scary. And I think that's one reason that I'm so drawn to them, because they are at once comforting and terrifying. I mean, and are they terrifying? They're terrifying because terrifying things happen in them. Generally, they end happily, so they're comforting. But then at what point do they become comforting because we know the mechanics and we know the tropes so well, right? So I think that they're they're comforting in about 50 different ways, right? So they're still very disturbing. But I think that as a child, they're comforting because, at least everything always generally. Now, sometimes things don't end that well, but generally for the main character, you have things like the very bad villain, which, in literary work, you're never going to find an actual villain. You need villains to be humanized. But in fairy tales, the villains can be just straight up complete bad guys. And they will all die, so that's going to happen. And then whoever it is, the young man who ran away from home or the young girl who was sold with the pears, which is one of my favorite stories in here, are going to come out okay, are going to be okay in the end. So I think that I am very drawn to folk and fairy tales because, and I think partly for that reason, because you have the very horrific and violent butting up against the very comforting and homey and warm. And at the same time, another thing that happens in fairy and folk tales in general is that the supernatural is that anything can happen. Animals can talk, trees can, fly up in the air. Anything at all can happen in a fairy tale, which I think is another, aspect of, I've never seen the fantastic, but when I go to write, the fantastic comes into my work on its own. It's not me that's saying, I want to make this weird or I want to make this supernatural. How can I make this, it just happens. And so I have to imagine that one of the reasons is because I read these 900, there are probably, 500 stories in here.
Yeah, that is a huge book.
Each one is the shortest one is going to be like a page and a half. The longest are going to be probably 5 pages. So it's funny. And it wasn't until I got this edition because I do have one book of my mom's that I'm going to share with you. This one is my mom's actual copy. But most of my mom's books and all the books from childhood have been lost over the years of many, many moves and our lives being very unstable. Most of my childhood possessions have been lost. Yeah. I do have a few. And so therefore I don't have many of my mother's books. But as soon as I think I bought this one at Chamberlain Book Mine, which is have you been to Jacksonville, Florida?
No.
Chamberlain Book Mine is the finest used bookstore on earth, and it is like a city. It's the size of a city block. It's insane. So if you ever go to Jacksonville,
I'll find a reason.
You got to go to Chamberlain.
Now I will find a reason.
So I bought this one at Chamberlain with, and this would have been when I was living in Asheville. So I was probably in my mid-20s when I bought this, mid to mid-late 20s when I bought this. And as soon as I bought this and I read the introduction, Calvino's introduction, I was like, oh my God. Because, then I had come upon and read his other work, and I was like, holy crap. So he what Calvino did was he went to all, he took tales from the various provinces, right? There are Sicilian tales, Tuscan tales. Some of them were better documented than others. So he dove into the archives of anything that had been recorded in terms of Italian folktales. And he spent, years just immersed in those, just immersed. Some of them were more formed and, there were more versions. Some of them were less. Like apparently Sicilians had a ton of recorded stories for some reason. Sicilians like to tell stories and record them. Whereas it wasn't the Tuscans, but it was some other group didn't have nearly as much. Like Romans, there's not a ton from Rome. He's like, there's some parts of Italy that there weren't a ton of the folktales that had been written down, but he chose at least two from not two total, but he from each tiny place he went to, he tried to choose 2 stories and put in the book. So that's why there are, 500 stories in here. Yeah. And then he says that in terms of how he shaped them, he did shape the storytelling and the writing, although he said for some of them they needed a good bit of shaping. For others of them, they didn't need much shaping. So how much each one of these was actually changed by the hand of Calvino is not really known. But he did say that he tried to make them feel more uniform, like in terms of the vocabulary and some structure. He did add elements to some stories. Yeah. But many of them were as they arrived. So it's funny in a way. This is like a collaboration between Italo Calvino and every Italian mother. And he references that almost all of the old time storytellers were crones, were old women. So he's like, I mean, in here he says repeatedly that people who kept these tales and told them were women. They were all women.
Here.
They were all old women. They were old women who were the person in the village you knew you went to get the story, and that's who I went to get these stories. So he went and like interviewed. I mean, some of them, some of these,
cool.
some of them were written down. Some of them had never been. So he went and interviewed the storytellers who were still holding on to them.
Imagine that.
Yeah, yeah, and he just transcribed, what the old crone was telling him. So,
like, you wonder if he even knew just how crazy that was in the middle of it.
He says it repeatedly. He says, in this introduction, he says, I lost my mind. I mean, he states that categorically.
Yeah, how could you not?
He's like, I went insane, and I'm afraid, I don't know if I'll ever be the same after this experience, he says. I mean, he says it right here.
Well, there's a reason to do it, to go insane.
He says it right here. I, however, plunged into that submarine world totally unequipped, without even a tankful of intellectual enthusiasm for anything spontaneous and primitive. I was subjected to all the discomforts of immersion in an almost formless element, which, like the sluggish and passive oral tradition, could never be brought under conscious control. I could not forget for even an instant with what mystifying material I was dealing. So, I mean, he's got this, and he also, so he lays out his criteria. He talks about how impossible and insane this was and how it's like seeped into him. He talks about the various regions. And he also references like Boccaccio and various other, and he talks a good bit about, Perrault and Prop and the Brothers Grimm and the other, world people in the, from other countries who have collected tales and the similarities and differences and things. But when I was a child, I just dove right in, and read the stories cover to cover.
Wow.
But anyway, so there's a couple. There's one. The very first story is called Dauntless Little John, and it's a really fantastic tale. And then there's one that I like called The Girl Who Was Sold with the Pears. I mean, but there's all kinds. These are all really great. But anyway, I'm trying to think of a one. I want to see if there's one that I could read like the opening of or something.
Yeah, I love when people read.
Okay. There was once a lad. I'm going to read at the beginning of the first story because it's, he knows how to organize a collection and he put a good one up front. There was once a lad whom everyone called Dauntless Little John, since he was afraid of nothing. Traveling about the world, he came to an inn where he asked for lodgings. "We have no room here," said the innkeeper, "but if you're afraid, I will direct you to a certain palace where you can stay." "Why should I be afraid?" People shudder at the thought of that palace, since nobody who's gone in has come out alive. In the morning, the friars go up with the beer for anyone brave enough to spend the night inside. So what did little John do but pick up a lamp, a bottle, and a sausage, and march straight to the palace? At midnight, he was sitting at the table eating when he heard a voice in the chimney. "Shall I throw it down?" "Go ahead," replied Little John. Down the chimney, into the fireplace, fell a man's leg. Little John drank a glass of wine. Then the voice spoke again. "Shall I throw it down?" "Go ahead." So another leg dropped into the fireplace. Little John bit into the sausage. "Shall I throw it down?" "Go ahead." So down came an arm. Little John began whistling a tune. "Shall I throw it down?" "By all means." And there was another arm. "Shall I throw it down?" "Yes." And then came the trunk of a body, and the arms and legs stuck onto it, and there stood a man without a head. Anyway, I don't want.
Oh my gosh.
So that kind of immediate melding of mystery, fear, and then the supernatural, like things that can't possibly happening and being treated as though they're just normal and this is fine and I can deal with it. It's something that I was immediately entranced by as a
this makes so much sense
tiny child
for you.
But yeah, so and so this was really formative for me. But at the time, of course, I didn't know it. And there some of these are there's a lot of ones that deal with the sea. Like there's a whole slew of them that are set like seafaring or in seaside villages or on ships and things like that.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so that was the first book. I
That's
thought I would.
I don't think we could have started with a better one for you in terms of how it's influenced your writing.
Yeah.
and how it was like a dormant thing, like where you just don't know how much this,
Yeah.
it was so long ago.
Yeah.
It's wild how something can last.
So I think, and I mean, when we're children, what we take in as children, that's what we lose last when we lose our memory. I mean, this is, the last things that we're gonna know are the things that we did first in our lives. So this was so early for me. Yeah, this was so early for me.
It's just incredible to me that you had access to all this.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So what about number 2?
Okay, so now I'll talk about another really wonderful writer whose work I am just crazy about in every way, Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And so the second book I have chosen is his Chronicle of a Death Foretold. And the copy that I have here, this was my mom's actual copy. So it's got Julie Fawkes 3984 in it. So that's when she brought it home. And it's also got her annotations. The Pursuit of Love is like falconry. Is the Gil Vicente is the but anyway, so this is a book. It's kind of a novella. Like it's a pretty short book, and it came out in 1980. 81 or 82, I believe. So the first sentence of this book announces that a man named Santiago Nassar will be killed, and at the book's end, Santiago Nassar is killed. So this is what's so cool about it is that this is it's a retrospective first-person narrative. So you have an unnamed narrator who was a part of the events, who was kind of at the periphery, what I like to call a peripheral narrator. He was at the periphery of the events that happened in this book, and he's looking back as an old man many, many years later and trying to make sense out of what happened. So basically you have, this is a small village in Colombia. So he's a Colombian writer, and he's from Colombia. And there were a lot of Middle Eastern immigrants to Colombia and to Central and South America in the early part of the 20th century. So it's a village where there is a mixture of immigrants from various parts of the Middle East. So that's how that Santiago Nassar, he's a guy of Turkish descent. And the story is about, so it takes place. So it's a retrospective narrative where a man is looking back from, I think, 37 years in the future. But the events of the book take place in, I think it's 2 hours. So everything that happens in the book that is relayed by the narrator who's looking back over 37 years happens in 2 hours. And the situation is that the day before this book takes place, it takes place in the morning, there was a big wedding. There was a wedding in the village. It was a huge affair. Everyone was there. It was a big, and the bridegroom discovered on the wedding night that his bride was not a virgin. And he brought her, so he brings her home to her parents' house and says, this woman is not a virgin, and it's like throws her back to her family. Her 2 twin brothers force her to tell them who stole her honor, and she names this guy Santiago Nassar. Now, you never know, ever, if she was telling the truth, ever. You never get to learn that as the reader of this book. But the 2 brothers set out to kill him for dishonoring their sister, and they announce to everybody they meet that that's what they're going to do. So they've all been up all night because they were partying all night from the wedding before. So they're going through the streets of the village with knives, saying we're going to murder him. He dishonored our sister. Everybody knows what's going to happen to Santiago Nassar. Nobody tells him what's going to happen. Even the people who see him. So, so this is like a moment by moment, looking through 40 years, retelling of 2 hours of this morning after this big wedding, of these 2 guys hunting these two brothers hunting him through the streets of their village. And at the end of the book, they kill him. And he's like, what? Why have I been killed? What is happening here? But the reader never knows whether whether she told the truth about what happened. And it was apparently based on a real story, something that actually happened in a village in Colombia where a bridegroom brought his bride back because he discovered she wasn't pure. So on their wedding night, the way that so it's a first-person narrator who's unnamed and feels like a third-person narrator because he recedes into the background so often and just tells the story. But then he like pokes it, then he'll say, my sister, he'll say these things that bring you back to the fact that this is a person who was there, who's telling you the story. But it's so artfully done, even though it's told through such a veil of history. He talks about he goes and interviews people, so he also talks about going back and interviewing the people who were involved, who were still alive.
Wow.
Yeah. So he talks to the woman, who was part of the scandal, and she refuses to tell him still whether Santiago Nassar was really the person who, and there's all kinds of talk about there are various ways for women to lose their, riding a horse, you can lose your honor, or, this kind of he throws all these kinds of other explanations, in there. But it's like 100-page, incredibly compact. It's not a murder mystery in that, the question isn't who's going to die or who's going to kill someone. The question is, how could all the villagers have let this happen without warning him? Yeah. And how complicit are all the people who knew he was going to be killed but didn't tell him in time? Some of them are like, I thought someone else had told him, but I thought this guy had told him. I'm sure that he had heard about it, because these guys were going through the streets literally saying, we're going to kill this guy.
Yeah, so the mystery is not even the typical mystery. The mystery is solved immediately. And that's a neat trend. It's a very hard thing to do. It's a good move.
To give away. And so the point of the story, as I say, is not, who did it or why, because we know why they did it too. The point of the story is how could this happen?
Yeah. How could it happen if you knew?
How could it happen if all these people knew? And did the entire village in fact kill Santiago Nassar?
Wow.
Was it a
That's
group?
A question.
Yeah.
Gosh. This reminds me of when, and I'm blanking on the name of the book, you might remember it based on the beginning. But the first thing that happens is this woman shoots her husband.
Mm. Yeah.
And I remember Catherine presenting that, and I'm like, yeah, how do you make that book work?
Yeah, yeah.
So much of writing is we want to not know what's coming. Yeah. But when you start with something that just wow, okay, where does it go from here?
Right.
But in this case, it's not necessarily that direct, but he is stating, what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Right? But you're invested anyway because of, again, how? The
voice. I mean, so this is the voice of this book, the voice of the narrator, like all of Garcia Marquez, and there's a way in which, as I say, he has these fantastic, like 100 Years of Solitude and Love in the Time of Cholera that are huge books that are third person, so that there's this narrator who's narrating, and the narrator of this book, although it is a first person narrator, sounds like. So here, can I read the opening paragraph?
Please do. Yeah.
On the day they were going to kill him, Santiago Nassar got up at 5:30 in the morning to wait for the boat the bishop was coming on. He dreamed he was going through a grove of timber trees where a gentle drizzle was falling, and for an instant he was happy in his dream. But when he awoke, he felt completely spattered with bird shit.
Oh my gosh.
He was always dreaming about trees. Placida Lanero, his mother, told me 27 years later, recalling the details of that distressing Monday. The week before, he dreamed that he was alone in a tinfoil airplane and flying through the almond trees without bumping into anything, she said to me. So yeah, the voice is so specific and so full of personality that, one of the major things that is so fetching about all of his work is that how much personality he puts into this narrative voice. And then also I'd say that for this one, you don't know who this I is talking to you, and it takes you a while to figure it out. So that's another kind of pleasure for me, is like figuring out who this I that's talking to me is.
Gosh. Wow. I've not read that.
It's really great. It takes, it's very short.
It's kind of like, I was late to the game with My Mortal Enemy by Cather, which is like tiny book.
Yeah.
I devoured it, and honestly, it's one of my favorite. I mean, to me, it's like Catherine went from writing a 450-page Song of the Lark to that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's the kind of the actualization of, the maturation of a writer.
Yeah.
To me, it's like when you can have the same impact. And I loved her long books.
Right.
But
yeah,
to be able to do that, it takes skill.
Yeah. And it's a different, like it's a different, like something like this, it's like novella length. And I have another one. This one is also, short. It's a different skill set. It's a different than making the giant world of a big novel, which both of those writers did, in their other books. But it's a different impulse. I'd say that the impulse for the story is generally different. Like, I don't know, this is kind of ripped from the headlines in a way. I mean, it's such a such a scandalous sounding story, like, but it's really this tiny artful book that doesn't. It's not about the killing, although I will say that the description from childhood, this description, oh God, do I have it marked? There it is. Okay, so this is the moment when the killing actually happens. Mortally wounded 3 times, Santiago Nassar turned frontward again and leaned his back against his mother's door without the slightest resistance, as if he only wanted to help them finish killing him by his own contribution. They both kept on knifing him against the door with alternate easy stabs, floating in the dazzling backwater they had found on the other side of fear. They didn't hear the shouts of the whole town, frightened by its own crime. I felt the way you do when you're galloping on horseback, Pablo Vicario declared. Desperate, Pablo Vicario gave him a horizontal slash on the stomach, and all his intestines exploded out. Pedro Vicario was about to do the same, but his wrist twisted with horror, and he gave him a wild cut on the thigh. Santiago Nassar was still for an instant, leaning against the door, until he saw his own viscera in the sunlight, clean and blue, and he fell on his knees. That line about the viscera in the sunlight, clean and blue, is like burned into my brain. Like when I reread this book as an adult, I was like, like that description of his intestines. Yeah. And he also like picks them up a little later and dusts them off before he like stumbles into his house and falls down dead. Like all that business. So while this is like, it's going into such human, like that description of the backside of fear, and then moving into this vivid description of the viscera, it's like it's doing so many incredible things at once that I want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh God, you sold me.
I'm like, anyway, but
that's amazing. Yeah, gosh, those lines. Yeah. Man. Yeah, I'm gonna dive into that very soon.
It's good. And this, I know this is like a big, like, I mean, people may not want to read tons of folk tales, but they're really delightful. And it's the kind of thing that you can dip into,
exactly.
You can dip into it.
Yeah.
But so I'll proceed.
Another big one.
So now I'm going to talk about the Odyssey, because the Odyssey is a really central text for me in many ways. Like, so my first experience with the story of the Odyssey, I did children's theater growing up here in Little Rock, Arkansas, at the Arkansas Art Center. And when I was, I think, 14 or 15, we did a production of the Odyssey. So my first encounter with this story was then. Like, I was, so that was great fun. I was the, like, what else did I do? I was the whirlpool. Like, that was one of my, we were kind of like, you did a lot of roles if you weren't one of the main characters. I was always like a side player, bit player, someone who played a lot of small roles. I played the Charybdis was the name of the whirlpool. So I stood up with this giant sheet that was like, crinkly and made a sound. It was also like blue and green and was like whipped it around in a circle, So my first experience with the story of the Odyssey and with the, meeting the characters, Odysseus and Penelope and Telemachus and all the other characters was doing a play. And then freshman year at Columbia, everybody, was part of the core curriculum in our Western, was it called? It wasn't contemporary civilization. It was literature humanities, which was the core literature class. So the Odyssey, we read both the Iliad and the Odyssey. So I read it for the first time in college. And then years later, when I was working on my MFA, when I was trying to figure out what I was going to do for my thesis project, I can't remember if it was that, did I pick up the Odyssey or did I read something? Maybe I read an article or something that referred to the Odyssey, and the Polyphemus the Cyclops.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, wow, what if, I just had this, what if I tried writing a story from the point of view of that Cyclops? I don't really, the impulse was just like, somehow suggested to me. And so this was first year of my MFA, and I had been trying to work on a novel that I wasn't able to figure out how to make it work because writing a novel is really hard and vast and weird. So I was like, okay, why don't I try this? So I wrote the story, which is in Tales of
Oh my God, I love that origin story.
And that was the first story that I wrote in that book. That was the original story that inspired the rest of the book.
That's nuts.
So at that time I pulled out the Odyssey and I reread, I think it's book 11. It's book 9. I reread that section repeatedly and was like, okay, started to have ideas about how I could inhabit Polyphemus. So I wrote the story and I presented it to my MFA workshop, class, and the people were like, wow, this is really amazing, but you should know that, and I was like, this is what I'm going to do for my thesis. I thought I was going to tell all the stories from the Odyssey from the point of view of the people that he encounters. So a story from the point of view of Circe, the Lotus Eaters, Calypso, everybody that he encounters, Penelope, it's like the wind god. But anyway, so that was what I was thinking I was going to do. And then someone was like, oh, a book like that came out last year.
Psych.
It's a great book.
The whole plans are destroyed.
Yeah, I was like, So it's called The Lost Books of the Odyssey, and I have it over there somewhere, and it's a great book. Zachary Mason is the name of the author, and it won the Start Your Own Fiction Prize, like the very first one, I think, maybe, which was a prize it's probably not even around anymore. So I was like, well, darn. And I said, what else can I do? I love the Polyphemus story so much.
Oh, yeah.
And so I started thinking, what else could I do with this story? What's another container that I could find that I could put this story in a book with other stories that would maybe fit together? What could I do? I had the idea. I thought, well, what if I look at some other bad guys or not, foils, or antagonists in books, in popular stories, and maybe think about reimagining the story from the point of view of that person. And for me, I love variety. Yeah. I love variety. Most people seem to not like variety. Most people seem to want the same thing over and over again. But
no.
I'm very
no, not me. You're in good company.
So that was when so the second story I wrote was Never Never, the Peter Pan story. So I thought, well, what if Captain Hook, got a job at the post office and had a stepson?
Look, I just have to stay here right now. That is one of my favorite short stories of all time. When I sell your book, I talk about that story.
Oh,
it's so good.
Thank you.
It's like, how did you come up with this?
Yeah.
It's, oh my gosh. Yeah, it's just incredible.
And those two stories, so those were the genesis of Tales the Devil Told Me. And they kind of also, in terms of the way the book works, the Polyphemus story, A Moment on the Lips, it follows the Odyssey beat for beat. It does not stray from the story. It only gives you the perspective of the Cyclops instead of the perspective of the Greek guys. So you're in the cave. And I had it open the whole time I was writing it to make sure I was getting all the beats right. So I was following it. Whereas Never Never takes two characters out of it, or several characters, more than two, because Smee is in there, out of a story and drops them into a completely different context, i.e. the modern world. So all the stories in that book fall on a spectrum.
Yeah.
Between the original setting and then a wholly new invented set, or between the original setting of the book.
Which makes it rich.
Or a new.
I think if you had just followed the same script from, I wrote a good first story.
Right.
Let's just do that again.
Yes.
I like that pretty much immediately you're like, nope, actually, you're the opposite here.
Well, so I thought that's what I would like. So I was like, that's what I should do, I should do it this way.
Look,
because when I read a story collection and I read the first 3 stories and feel like I've read the same story 3 times, I put the book down. But that's just me. I'm apparently
bingo.
different.
That's exactly what I cannot stand, because I'm just like, it's the same thing of writing 4 novels that are trying to be as good as the first one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Elizabeth Gonzalez James and I talked about this,
Yeah.
which I saw your book on her bookshelf, and I was like,
I have the bullets fall over there. She and I started conversing because we were both finalists for a book contest, and then we started talking online, and she's really cool.
And she's the one who recommended, or one of her books on the web is Temporary.
Yes, Hillary liked her. Yes, that
so it's like this whole world of people where, but Elizabeth is like, I wrote The Bullet Swallower, but I'm not going to do anything remotely close to that next time.
Right. Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
like, thank you.
She's also
Because to be honest, I think you would be doing yourself a disservice to not try to do that again with something completely different.
Yeah.
You already did it with this.
Right.
Don't do another Western.
Yeah.
That's low-hanging fruit.
Right.
Now, granted, might be easier to appease a publisher and readers, but it's the same thing with an album.
Yeah.
Don't make a great album and make the same one.
Yeah.
Right? Just go for it again because you've already shown you can do it with one unique thing.
Right.
Why couldn't you do it again with another unique thing?
Right.
And it's the same thing as story collection.
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely
I kind of want to feel like they're not I'm just pulling into a completely different book.
Yeah. Well, and there are the writers that I love the most are writers who moved in a variety of different ways, tackled a variety of different, not that there aren't in every writer there are concerns. You could feel those concerns come up again and again. But a writer like now for me, and I almost picked a Walter Tevis book, but Kevin might possibly talk to you about Walter Tevis more. So Walter Tevis is. I did not read his work until last year. And I am like, my life, I cannot believe I have gone this long. And I have since read everything he wrote because the work speaks directly into my heart in a way that very few, it just doesn't happen that often. So, but Kevin is a huge Walter Tevis fan. And so we've talked about him a ton. And every one of his books is different. His approach to every book is different, but his concerns, you identify them and they're like, oh, these concerns are still here, these concerns are still here. And they just happen to dovetail with a lot of my own concerns. But the fact that he goes to these amazing lengths to construct these different, the books are so different from each other. Like you have The Queen's Gambit, which was made into this, I haven't seen the series.
I haven't either.
It was like reading that book, I did not want it to end. I don't know the last time that I was like, I can't, I was reading it so slowly. Yeah. I was like, this can't end. My life's going to end when this book ends. And that's a real, it's realism about an orphan who becomes a chess champion, a female. It reminds me of the way that Charles Portis handles Maddie Ross in True Grit. That kind of handling of a character who is this is why I love to write. I want to inhabit other people. Walter Tevis was like, I want to inhabit this female orphan, this young girl who is an orphan who becomes good at something I love. He loved chess. But to feel your way into that kind of character who is so different from you, that's why one of the reasons that Jen Fawkes write, because I know what Jen Fawkes thinks. I know what a 50-year-old white woman, who was born in Chicago and is named Jen Fawkes and grew up in Arkansas. I know what she thinks and I know what she's done and I know what she's felt. I'd like to know what other people feel. And that's why I read and that's why I write,
Well, I just love that, you pick this old book and you have no idea where it's going to take you.
Yeah.
And it ends up becoming what I consider one of the best short story collections I've ever read. Like it's just nuts to know that.
Yeah.
That you were just like, oh yeah, let me try this out.
Right.
That's so cool.
Well, and then I made an enormous list of potential stories to retell. I didn't get to all of them, but the ones I got to, and then there were two that I wrote that didn't make it in because I decided my two criteria were that they needed to honor the original story and be respectful and honor the original story and be like a sort of a love letter to the original story. And then they also had to be strong enough as pieces of work to stand on their own so that even people who had no idea of the origin story would be able to enjoy that story on its face, right? That was my two criteria.
That's the right criteria.
So I had two stories that I felt one of them didn't quite make it narratively, didn't hang together well enough as a standalone story for me. And the other one, and this might sound funny coming from someone who wrote a book with that many disturbing things in it, but I thought it might have been a bit too disturbing. If you can imagine.
Which one was this?
It was a retelling of, it was about the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It was a Narnia story in which Mr. Tumnus is having an illicit affair with a very young fawn. It's sort of based on Lolita.
I wrote this quote down. I'm just not certain how much fawn sex your average reader can handle.
That's it. Bing, bing.
And that is why I love your writing.
So yeah,
I didn't make the cut, but It was written.
I was a little bit like, because it was like kind of he was like a dirty old Tumnus. He was a dirty old fawn Tumnus. And he was having this, and I was like, but anyway, it's funny because of the stuff that did make it into the book,
Yeah. I mean, the bar was high.
But anyway, the Odyssey is just, it is, this book is, I'm super into the ancient world, especially since undergrad, since reading, in Sophocles. We read all the Greeks, we read all the, in Lysistrata. I also thought about picking Lysistrata because but the Odyssey is so much, I know it so well, and its stories are so important, I think for the whole world.
Yeah.
But I also want to, people who may be like, oh, I couldn't read, an 800-page book of verse that's from the 8th century BCE. Well, these are like some of the most amazing stories. And reading them, this is the Fagles translation, which I'm sure there are others. I think this one came out in 96, but I really love Fagles' approach. This is where Circe, so many people, people might know, people who have written books that are retelling elements of this book, like Circe, and there's so much that is in our popular culture that comes from the Odyssey and the Iliad. I think that most people aren't aware of that, and also aren't aware of what like ripping yarns these are. And this is also a seafaring. Much of this narrative takes place on the sea. There's lots of storms, there's lots of waves washing all the men out to sea, and then the men having to crawl onto the shores of an island, and then, a witch turns them into pigs, I was like, I'm like,
that's amazing.
This is right up my alley.
Yep.
And I think that lots of people who don't, who maybe haven't actually read the Odyssey would find it to be, a ripping yarn.
Yeah.
Quite a wonderful adventure story. Let's bring it back.
Let's make it popular fiction.
Bring it back. Bring back the Odyssey.
I love it. Sweet.
Yes.
So what about number 4?
Well, we'll move on. So we'll move on now. And so these were all very formative for me as a young person. Now I'm going to talk about Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. This is the book that Blade Runner is based on.
Oh.
Yeah. So the film Blade Runner.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So P.K. Dick he's one of the most prolific science fiction writers of the 20th century. He wrote something like 30 novels and like 170 short stories or something like that.
Jeez.
He was also mentally ill, arguably, he was mentally ill. He had a lot of issues. So he was really the first person to really yoke deep philosophical, really deep and sort of penetrating philosophical ideas, the kind of ideas that I, can't get away from, that are in my head all the time, to science fiction in a way that other people, no one else has really ever, for me, replicated what P.K. Dick did. I saw Blade Runner years before I first read this book. So Blade Runner came out in probably 85, 86, or was it even earlier than that? I was a kid when it came out. So I saw Blade Runner first. Then I read, Do Androids. I was like, well, let me check out that book. That sounds exciting. So I read this book probably, when I was in my 20s, at some point. And it has a lot in common with Blade Runner, but its questions and Blade Runner's questions aren't really the same questions. Blade Runner is a great movie and I love it. But this book, animals. So this is set in a post-apocalyptic science fiction novel. It's set on an Earth which it doesn't ever say it's fallout, but it's like there's been a nuclear war and there's dust everywhere. And many humans have immigrated to Mars, to colonies on Mars. And so the people who are left on Earth are people who can't immigrate for various reasons, or who won't, right? Who either won't or can't immigrate. When the dust started falling, animals started dying out of the world. And there are hardly any real animals left in the world. But it is expected for everybody who remains on Earth to take care of an animal. So the centrality of animals to this book is something I would never have anticipated from having seen Blade Runner, or just from thinking about the book and what it could be about. But the main character is obsessed obsessed with animals. So it's an A story and a B story. The A story is about this Rick Decker, who's a bounty hunter, and that's the character Harrison Ford plays in the movie. And so they're androids. They have started making robots who are incredibly human, and they've now started. There's a new model out called the Nexus 6. So his job is he's a bounty hunter who chases down renegade androids. So the androids are made as to basically be slaves for human beings. So they're made to be servants for human beings. Many of them are exported to the colonies on Mars, but there are still people on Earth who have them too. So most of the androids, they call them INDIES, are off planet in this book, but they're becoming so smart. Even the generations of the robots that have the previous robot generations of the last, say, 20 years have been becoming so smart that they'll go rogue. And so there are people whose job it is to hunt them down and retire them. So that's the language that is used. So he is a bounty hunter, and his job is to retire Andes or androids that are so human that it has become impossible to tell the difference between them and real people. Yeah. So that's one thread. And then the other thread is the story is that there are 6 androids who have escaped and that are this newest, Nexus 6 is the name of the newest version, and that he sets out to try to find them. The other main character is a man named John Isidore, who is a special. So he's someone who has lost some brain function because of the nuclear fallout. And he is classified as a special, which means he's lost some mental acuity. And he encounters the escaped Andes and tries to help them. The other main character, John Isidore. So it's there's a story and a B story, and they collide and they are intertwined. But the obsession with what is real and what is not real and what is a facsimile and what is a simulation is like Philip K. Dick, maybe his most central concern in all of his work.
Interesting.
It's all spread throughout all of his work. So he is very concerned with whether or not we can tell what is real. And that is something that I am very concerned with too.
I just read something this morning about how few, I don't remember if it was Gen Z or if it was just like a random sample of people, but how few of them could tell the difference between AI and real images on the internet.
Oh, boy.
And that will probably only get worse.
Yeah. Which is why they can't understand that when they turn in an assignment to their professor that is written with AI, how it is that we know.
Yeah.
Because there is no way you can pass off AI as actual human writing to people who know how to tell what human writing is.
So it's just interesting that we've already struggled with people who can't fact check a lie on their own.
Right.
And now it's going even deeper into that because, it should be you would think it would be easy if someone says something like, Donald Trump says egg prices have gone down 93%.
Right.
Well, it's bullshit because you could just walk into a grocery store and see that's untrue.
Right.
Now, whether or not that matters if it's true to you or not, that has something to do with your psychological capacity for being in a cult.
Right. Right. Yeah.
But nonetheless, it's like even some lies are, a little bit harder to tell.
Right.
And you still should be able to find information to know if it's true or not.
Right.
You might have to dig a little bit deeper. You might not be able to go into a grocery store.
Yeah.
But at this point, people are questioning whether or not Harriet Tubman was real.
Yeah.
Did you see this?
No.
Yeah. There's a whole bunch of people online that are starting to question Harriet Tubman's existence. There are people that think Joe Biden wore a mask and was not a real person. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Now, whether or not those are real people and they believe that.
Right. Or they're just,
or they're bots. I don't know.
Right.
Point is, though,
it's
a serious concern of our time.
Well,
real and not real or.
Right.
So, at any rate.
Okay.
What's number 5?
So number 5 is, so this is a book that everyone on earth should read. And this is a book that I did not read until I think probably 2019. Huh. Mrs. Caliban is the name of the book. And I think there was a list that came out a couple of years ago that had the best, 100 best novels or whatnot. This was on there really high up or whatever. And most people were like, I've never heard of this book. So Rachel Ingalls is a woman I believe she's American, but moved to England. I might have to double check myself on that, but that's what I think I remember. And that she has quietly been, she was quietly living in England, writing and putting out books for years. And I had never even heard her name. I'm not sure. She may have passed on, but this one came out in, I believe the publication date was 1983. Yes. So this is a new version that, who put this out? New Directions. They put out this new version of it probably in 2019 or 2020, I think. And so I ordered it as soon as I read about it because I was like, what is this? So
I've never heard of it.
This is a book about an ordinary housewife who starts hearing strange things on her radio. One of the things she hears is that a sea creature, a sea monster,
of course,
has escaped. Let's see, ladies and gentlemen. Early this morning, keepers at the Jefferson Institute for Oceanographic Research were attacked by a creature captured 6 months ago by Professor William Dexter on his South American expedition. The creature, known to the popular press by his nickname, Aquarius the Monster Man, appears from intensive scientific analysis to be a giant lizard-like animal capable of living both underwater and on dry land for extended periods. So she hears she hears a couple of things on her radio where she's like, that's weird. Before that, Then she hears this and she's like, wow, so a monster man, has escaped. And so she's just an ordinary California housewife set in California. And she's going to make dinner. She has to make dinner for her husband, who's bringing a client home. And she goes to the grocery store and she comes home. She starts making dinner and she turns around and there is a giant lizard man standing in her kitchen. And thus unfolds one of the most shockingly delightful and insane and just piercingly, I mean, just the sorrow, the depth of the sorrow that this book, but at the same time, so she and the lizard man fall in love.
They had to.
He lives in she hides him from her husband. They have lots of sex. They have lots of lizard sex. None of it is described in any detail, so no one's going to be shocked. But she and his name is Larry.
Larry, the lizard man?
Her name is Dorothy. His name is Larry. He's a giant lizard man. And, you never know throughout the entire book whether Larry actually exists or not. But what is most astonishing to me about this is the way it's also a story about married couples and how difficult it is to be married and how difficult it is to remain married. Yeah. And it's about loss, deep loss. So the main sort of piece, one of the main, the most important things to know about Dorothy is that she and her husband had a child who died. And the child died under general anesthesia, and it was very unexpected. And since then, after that, she and her husband grew apart. Yeah. And so she's been dealing with, and so that is like the deep sadness at the core of her life. But she has like a wacky friend. It's a very funny book too. She has this wonderful wacky friend. And what I was most astonished by was this book blindsided me with the ending, surprised me with something that was there from the very beginning that I never saw. And I was like, I screamed when I got to when I got to the end of the book. I was like, and I went right back to the beginning and read the entire book and looked and saw that it was all laid out, and this is what good writers, this is what your best writers do, because this is what I tell my students. A book, a movie, the first time you read it, the first time you watch it, you're just getting the story. You're not really able to look inside of a piece until you're watching or reading it the second time. The second time is when you really begin to know a piece, a text. Like you have to come back to a text for a second time. And so even like your favorite films, I tell my students, go watch your favorite movie and see how many new things you find when you watch it again. And they do, because you put the part of your brain that needs to learn the story, you get to just put that part aside. And so all these other pieces of thematic meaning and storytelling, point of view tricks and whatever else the writer's doing or the filmmaker is doing comes in, and you get, you're like, I'm just overwhelmed by how much. So the plot surprise that happens at the end of this book took me so unawares that I was like, there is no way she did that. I flipped back to the beginning and I reread the entire thing right then and there. Because it's a very short book and it goes really fast because it's so much fun. Like it's so wild, and you never know if this is in Dorothy's mind. And so some of my favorite kind of some of my favorite kind of texts play with this idea. I love books that walk this psychological.
Yeah.
Is this psychological in movies as well? So in Mrs. Caliban is, of course, a reference to the character, the character from The Tempest, Caliban, who's the monstrous servant of Prospero. So Prospero has the two servants, one of which is Ariel, who's the light, the light fairy, the wonderful, beautiful, wee light fairy who's skipping around. And then he has the servant Caliban, who's this like evil, angry monster. So I did not know what to expect. And it's just, this is David Lynch was influenced by her. There's all kinds of, and that, she's connected deeply to Angela Carter, which is like absolutely one of my all-time favorite. And I thought about putting, The Bloody Chamber, or even the Sadian Woman, which is the first book I ever read by her, which is a book of criticism about pornography. But I thought, because this was so good. And I think that, if I had encountered, I think what could have happened if I had encountered this when I was, in my 20s? What could have happened if I had encountered Tebus, in my 20s? I have those, sometimes I have some like reading regrets where I'm like, why didn't someone give this to me? But when Kevin, when I told him, he was like, you've never read Mrs. Caliban? Oh my God.
Of course
he couldn't. Oh, well, yes. He's like, he knows it incredibly well. He's like, if you had been one of my students, I would have given it to you. Because he gives his students books. He always gives them. I'm sure he does. And another really interesting thing for me about this book is this book plays with unreliable narration, but it's not a first-person narrator. That is very unusual. It's hard to create. So third-person narration gives this automatic sense of authenticity and trustworthiness that it's built in. Like when you're getting a third-person point of view as a reader, we're automatically lulled into this, I can trust this narrator. They're not going to steer me wrong. Well, this is a third-person presentation of this woman, Dorothy. So it's not told from her point of view, although it is close. It's like a close third on her. You don't get anyone else's thoughts. But it plays with unreliability in a way that's like astonishing to me and very, very interesting and unique.
That's high praise.
Wonderful.
Gosh, dang it. See, I knew.
Yeah.
Oh, it's going to be hard not to just go buy all these.
They're great books. But yeah, and then I thought, should I talk about Final? Or do you want to talk about this, Kevin?
Yeah.
So I thought this is a book that Kevin said to me as soon as he was like, have you read this? And so I think this came out in 2020. So this is, for me, the best book of the 21st century that has been written in the 21st century for me as a reader. Like this is Jen Fawkes' number one pick of the books I've read that have been written in the 21st century.
Wow. Okay.
If you read it, you would, it is the most, like, we have a first person unreliable narrator who is telling a story in complete ignorance of how he arrived. So how he's arrived at where he is. He's a person who is just telling his world, telling us about his world. He's writing it down. The conceit is like, I love structural conceits. Like I'm writing this down in a journal. I'm writing letters and that kind of formulaic structural conceit. But he keeps journals of his world. He lives in a house, a huge house with hundreds and hundreds of halls. This house periodically floods. So the ocean water rushes in and just floods halls in this enormous house he lives in. He has figured out the tides and he has learned how to time them. The only other beings in the house are statues, skeletons, statues, all of whom he has named and has a relationship with, and then a variety of skeletons, bodies that he has either assembled back into some sort of shape, or he has them set up in various places. The alcove where there's this statue, there's like a little skeleton beside it, and there's one other who lives in the house, and this other comes to visit him periodically, and he believes the other is the only living person in the world besides him, and he believes that the other is his friend. And the whole book is a process of breaking down what actually happened to this narrator, how he arrived at where he is, the place he's living, and so the setting is I've been thinking lately about books that aren't set in a physical, real place, but that are instead set in a place that is based somehow on, not on fantasy, like traditional fantasy, but on our knowledge of media on television. Like, for instance, Interior Chinatown by Charles Yu, which is set inside a fictional television show. Like, that's where the book is set. It's not set in any real world place you can point to. It's set inside a fictional television show. This is set in a supposed mystical realm that some people believe exists and some people don't. But the narrator of this book knows his memory is almost gone in terms of he's someone whose memory is very, very, very compromised. But he has made a careful study of the world he lives in, which is the interior of a house and the interior of this enormous house. That's like, floors, 9, 12 floors up and then hundreds and hundreds of halls. So that the place is like, he's never even explored it. It's so big. He's explored parts of it, right? He doesn't know how long he's been there. He doesn't know most things. He does not know his name. This narrator is one of the most engaging voices that you will ever encounter in a book. And he knows almost nothing about who he is, how he got where he is, what he's doing. All he knows is the world, the day-to-day tangible world he's living in, which is this enormous house that is periodically flooded with water. And then the waters recede and the waters come in and the waters recede. The only other person he lives there, he calls him the other, and the other calls him Piranesi. And that's where the name of the book comes from. Piranesi was a puzzle. He was like he was a puzzle maker. No, he was an architect. I think Piranesi was an ancient architect. I'm going to have to look, so like an Italian architect. But anyway, so there's no book like this that I've never encountered anything like this book. It's incredible. And so what ends up happening is, I don't want to give away the conceit, but, because the story is just so, but he learns little by little, another person comes into the house, another person that he's never seen, an other. So he counts everybody in the house. He counts himself, the other, and then all the dead bodies as all the people who have ever lived in the world. And then a new person comes in. So he calls that person 16 because they're the 16th person who's ever come into the world. And at first, he knows 16 is coming into the house, but he never sees them. Then he finally catches a glimpse of them. And then it's through this other person coming into the world who begins to leave him clues and give him information he didn't have before, that he begins to piece together what has happened to him, how he arrived there, and who the other really is, and what the other is doing to him, which is very extremely messed up, but really, really cool.
This is riveting.
It is so good. Well, you should definitely. I think it won.
I don't think I've ever.
I think she won the big British prize. I know
we've had this book in City Lights. I've never talked about it with anyone. Yeah. No one's ever told me about it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, essentially, you're the first person I've met that's read this, that's told me about it, and this might be the first time anybody's proclaimed the best book of the century.
Well,
so high praise.
Nobody cares what I think, but for me, this is. You do.
I trust it.
I think you. You're very sweet. You're very kind. I was so. This was another one that as soon as I finished it, I flipped back to the beginning because I was. This is one of those. How did she do this? So as far as I know, she wrote Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, which came out in probably 2010, 2012, maybe it was 2014, and it is talk about that. It's a door stopper. That book is this big. It's sitting around here somewhere. But then she worked on this book for 12, 15 years. That's how long it took her to.
That's when you know.
And this is how big it is. But it is so brilliant. It's beyond anything. And I think it won like maybe the Women's Prize for Fiction that year, the year that it came out. She's a British, writer, Susanna Clarke. But anyway, this is the most, talk about keeping you so engaged in a story that is giving you no information, like almost none. But the information it's giving you is so bizarre and intricate, and for me, it's got whimsy to it. He's living in this house where the sea rushes in, and he knows how to go hide. He knows how to climb up high enough so that the sea doesn't get him. And he's got he has a sleeping bag, and he has this, and he has that, and he keeps all his possessions tidy, and he writes about, how, he keeps an inventory of everything, but he's someone who has lost his memory. But he's able to keep these notes for himself so that he keeps, and he's able to navigate the house. And so it's like, in a way, he becomes a new person, while he's in the house. And so, but he's actually someone else. Oh, it's just so good. Sorry. Okay. It is an excellent book.
So you know how when I said, when I sell your books, people can tell I get excited? That's this. Yeah. And it's a sell.
Yeah, okay.
Whatever bookstore I buy it. Maybe I'll.
Okay.
I bought a couple books from Wordsworth earlier.
Okay.
This morning. Oh, by the way, your friend Ginger says hi.
Oh, we went to high school together.
I love that about Little Rock.
Yeah.
I stopped in there. I was buying a couple of books, one of which was one of Kevin's, so I could actually get it signed.
Oh, yes.
Because I didn't have it with me. And then it's like, of course, you all know each other.
Yes.
It's like this small little world. And I was like, what are the, and there were multiple booksellers in there.
Yeah.
You probably didn't go to school with any of them other than,
Ginger
than her.
probably.
So I thought that was funny. But at any rate, if they have it, maybe I'll go back and get it because, that sounds unreal.
It's wonderful. So,
like, what the heck?
So
it's exactly the type of story where I'm like, I don't even know what my reaction is to it. I just need to read it.
Well, it's something that's so unclassifiable in terms of because it's not only this amazing work of fantasy that is just like will blow your mind wide open. It's also the most satisfying literary mystery, like one of the most satisfying literary mysteries I've ever encountered, because it is absolutely a literary mystery. Like, how on earth is this possible? And something that Kevin pointed out, last time we had lunch together, we talked about Piranesi being the opposite of an unreliable narrator. He's the most reliable narrator you have ever encountered, first-person narrator, but he knows nothing. Like, he knows nothing about how he got to where he is, where he came from, how all this is, but he's so reliable. Which is like, for me, that's actually, and when Kevin and I were talking about that, it brought me back to Sylvie Swift and the way that I tried to make that character when I was talking about it in an interview once. And I said, so what I was setting out to do was make her ultra reliable because so much that's unbelievable is happening all around her. And then I was like, Jesus Christ. When Kevin and I were talking, we were talking about how
what a realization is
this ultra reliable. It's like the opposite of the unreliable narrator. It's the ultra reliable narrator who you like, you want you need the reader to believe because otherwise they won't stick with it.
Wow.
Anyway.
Going out with a bang.
Yeah.
That was incredible. I love these books.
You.
Gosh. Yeah, this was delightful.
Yes.
I'm going to go buy Piranesi ASAP.
Okay.
That is 100%. And then I think
Mrs. Caliban
will be the second one I do because this is going to be great. So thank you again, Jen.
You're very welcome.
I really appreciate this.
Thank you so much. This was a wonderful opportunity, and I cannot wait to dive into my new books. I'm sure that I will. And really, this was wonderful. It made me. I was having a rough day, as I told you, and it's made me feel so much better. So
I'm glad.
Thank you.
I'm glad. It made me feel better, too. I mean, it always does. It's a joy. And I just love, too, that we're like, we look in the water here.
Yes.
The wharf sign.
Right. Yeah, Cajun's Wharf.
Right through this window.